Good evening, everyone. I only a couple of faces I don't think I know. I'm David Gasaway, City Manager here for City of Fairfield, and thank you so much to the Fairfield Sassoon Chamber for inviting me out and giving you all a little update. For most of you, I think there was a lot of you that came to the state of the city, so a little bit of redundancy. So bear with me on some of those. I'll try to move quickly through that stuff. But really tonight I've got sort of two big topics, right? Two sort of buckets. And I know this was advertised. I will be talking Measure P. So that's kind of the bigger of the two buckets. But as I give these updates, I also do want to just share other good news going on in the city and a bunch of other things that we've got going. So that's sort of that other bucket that I'll dive into. One thing that I've talked a lot about, I talked at State of the City about is infrastructure. So one of the things that we had kicked off last year and have had under construction is West Texas Complete Streets. We are nearing the end. We are. I'd asked you if I needed to talk like that. We're nearing the end. So, this is an aerial actually from today of the Complete Streets project as West Texas is coming along and
some applause over there.
and those improvements are coming to an end. One of the big questions that we've gotten a lot on this project is sort of the why, and so that's why I'm bringing it back up again. So here is what West Texas Street looked like before the project. And you'll notice it's essentially narrow sidewalks and then 5 lanes for traffic. So you have 2 lanes in each direction and then a center divide. And that center lane, and that center lane is what we all refer to as the suicide lane, right? You get in there, it's the turn lane. Yeah. This is or was the most dangerous street in Fairfield. So in terms of traffic collisions, car to pedestrian, car to cyclist, most dangerous street in Fairfield. So that's ultimately where this project comes from, is much more of a safety enhancement project so that we can bring those numbers down, while at the same time sort of expanding upon the work that we started in phase 1 of our downtown streetscapes improvement project. And so what it's referred to as, sort of old language, is it's a road diet. So essentially it's taking out 2 lanes so that traffic feels more constrained. And as traffic feels more constrained, what that does is that naturally slows people down, right? When they feel a little bit more boxed in. The width of the lane is still the same width as that lane was before, but it feels a little bit more constrained. So by adding a wider sidewalk, it makes it safer for pedestrians. We use up one of those lanes. A lot of that space then is for what will be segmented or segregated bike lanes. So if you've been through downtown Fairfield, you know that we striped it. It's got those big green sections, and it's very clear that this is a bike lane. That will continue all the way down West Texas, down just before Beck Avenue. And then it adds street trees, again, sort of keeping with that tree-lined street that we did with downtown. And through a couple of segments, we have a center divide. And that center divide then is to prevent traffic from actually making. So for much of the street, you still have that center turn lane, but in the areas, especially the big intersection that I've heard complaints about it, and I understand why. But like at First Street, for example, there's now a center divide to prevent turns there. And that's because it's close enough to the intersection with Pennsylvania where that was the most collision intersection. Because what would happen is you have traffic getting a red light at Pennsylvania. They start backing down, right? So the cars start queuing. You're backing up down West Texas, and now people are trying to get around that. So what do? Well, they cut across right at First Street to try to go around all of that as cars are coming out of the way, but they can't see them because they're back and there's cars in their way, and bam, right? So it's all of it is safety. That's the big why behind all of it. And it also just so happens to fit in line with our Heart of Fairfield specific plan vision of making it more of a pedestrian, multimodal transportation corridor as a part of encouraging that reinvestment in the Heart of Fairfield. Like I said, it's a continuation then of that downtown streetscapes project. So this is an overview map of downtown. So this is actually Texas Street after you cross over Pennsylvania. And ultimately, the way we've lined all of this street infrastructure out is as a sort of 3-phase or it's technically kind of a 4-phase, but phase 1 was the work we already did in downtown Fairfield. We removed all the trees, widened the sidewalks, replanted with a better species of tree. And I'll touch on the other thing. And then now we're doing West Texas. So now once all the work on West Texas is done, then it'll be reshifting focus back to do phase 2 of the downtown streetscapes. And what that will be is what this image is showing you is here in these sort of boxes where you have these little ovals and circles, those are each of the intersections. And each of those intersections then will essentially be ripped out and replaced with what are called bulb outs. And so bulb outs are where the sidewalk actually bulks out into the street a little bit more. And what that does is that narrows down the distance for the pedestrian crossing the street. So it got a lot safer once we put in all of the stop signs as opposed to the traffic signals. And then with the bulb outs, it makes it even safer for pedestrians because now instead of, traversing 30 something feet, you're only traversing, 22 feet or 24 feet, whatever that lane width is. And then we'll be removing all of those big concrete planters that are on the corners. The joke in the fire department is that's your badge of honor is once you've hit one of those in a fire engine. And a lot of other vehicles hit them as well, because as they make, especially large vehicles, as they turn one of those intersections and they drag over a little bit, they hit those things. So they're all beat up. And so all those will come out. It'll be much more of a flow, more open feeling. It'll make it feel like there's more space at the intersections while also improving pedestrian safety. And then the intersections, we're still trying to figure out what type of treatment we're going to do, but we're going to try to bring some, color pop and make all of that look nice. And hopefully we'll be doing some roadway improvement with that as well, so that even though we've already restriped it, we went to the one-way side streets, we already did the art and some of those things. All of it's trying to, really get us to the point where it was the vision in the specific plan that was adopted about 10 years ago now. I mentioned the art, right? So as we finished the last phase of the downtown project, we were able to get the Glashoffs. So, Phil Glashoff, before he passed away, actually donated 5 sculptures to the city. And so we went out to the ranch and we sort of worked through all of the inventory and figured out, okay, what will work well size-wise? So those now are installed across from the downtown theater, really, again, sort of reemphasizing that food and beverage and arts district that is the intent of what our hope on downtown revitalization is. All right, speaking of downtown, coming up this Saturday, I hope everybody's ready to be out there. We've got our 4th of July parade, which is our annual event, one of our annual events downtown. But of course, this year we're going bigger, right? It's the semi-quincentennial of America, our 250th anniversary. So we've got some special things in line. Every time I do these, I want to give a special shout out to the Fairfield Lions Club, who partnered with us, and they did a phenomenal job fundraising. They raised all of the money that has now resurfaced to the downtown arch. So it is now it's wrapped up right now, so you can't see it. We don't want everybody peeking, but I saw it when they were working on it. It looks fantastic. The exciting blue is vibrant. We replaced all of the neon tubing with tubed LEDs, so it'll still have that neon look, but much more energy efficient. It'll last a lot longer. It's hard finding people to do neon work these days. There's only a few folks still out there that do it. And we were, constantly, I remember one of the Fairfield Community Service Foundation, they do their dinner under the archway. And like the day before, somebody said, hey, half the sign's out. And we said, yeah, sorry, there's not much we're going to do by tomorrow, right? It's just not how quickly we can move on the neon. With the LEDs, we should remove, that level of need for maintenance. So we'll be celebrating that. We have a few special things. I know Liz is listening. She got camera shy, but she's really done a great job lining up sort of a fun little unveiling at the 4th of July. So certainly come early. That way you can get a spot right down by the arch, because that's where right as the parade kicks off, we've got some fun AM250 and archway unveiling ceremony to happen down there. North Texas revitalization. I know Chamber works closely with and helps the North Texas Business Improvement District. I brought some of the flyers as well on this, or it's on our website under our economic development teams page. But we have a matching grant program to help support revitalization of North Texas. So we first started with revitalization grants in downtown, and that's had a big effect. We've got a lot of business owners and property owners down there that have partnered with us. Essentially, what we do is we match them up to a certain dollar amount to make improvements that are the desired improvements. And so along North Texas, those improvements are mostly parking lot improvements. I know we've got a few shopping centers up there where you drive through and it's kind of a wild ride. So it's a matching for doing parking lot improvements, lighting improvements, particularly because that brings a much stronger sense of safety to people, especially at night. And that's one of the main concerns with that North Texas corridor is just that sense of safety, as well as signage and other just, landscaping, beautification types of things. So that is available. So any businesses that are along that North Texas, please, reach out sooner rather than later. We've already had, when we first started with downtown, it took us probably a year and a half to drag kicking and screaming the first business to partner with us. We unveiled this North Texas program, and I think within the first week we had 6 applications. So it's going to be first come, first serve. So long as people are eligible and they meet all the criteria, once that money runs out, it's gone forever. So now's the chance for everybody.
And they also did the portering service, which was wonderful.
Correct. Yeah. I just signed the update on that contract as well. So the portering service, and I think we have that downtown as well, but that's essentially a couple of days a week, someone going through and just doing litter pickup, right? Because unfortunately, in some of these corridors, that's one of those ongoing problems, and that helps out tremendously, just being more routinely on top of picking it up. Other capital improvements, I've got some updated photos here I'm proud of that I went out and took. So we are doing a twofer on fire stations. Fire Station 36 is our first new fire station in, I think, close to 20 years. That's over off of Business Center Drive, and that'll really serve sort of that Green Valley area north of I-80. We started contracting with the Cordelia Fire Protection District. So we picked up all of their jurisdictional territory, which goes up into Green Valley and the Green Valley Highlands and sort of way up in that area. So by having Station 36 there, we'll be able to meet all of the response timelines up in those areas as well. And I know I've heard from folks that live out there, it's not in the city's boundaries, but there was just a fire out there a couple of weeks ago.
Right behind my house.
Yep. And all I've heard from anybody that lives out there is, we're so glad you were the fire department on that one, because we were on it. And so
very efficient.
Yeah. So once 36 is completed, that'll even further improve our response times, as opposed to right now, they're co-located with Station 35, which is further down in Cordelia. And then 39 is a new station, but not a new company. And that's just replacing what is the oldest fire station that we have in all of Fairfield, Station 35 or 39 right now, which is on Huntington Drive. So the new one on Peabody, again, it's just a slight movement on where that's located, but it'll help us pick up a little bit more on the response times out in Northeast Fairfield, One Lake and up Peabody, in those areas where we have a lot of new development going on. Robbie Burberger Park, this is one of our first new parks in what was probably the largest park desert that we had in the city of Fairfield. So I guess it's been a little over a year now ago, City Council adopted our first ever park, recreation, and open space master plan. What that did was really took a look at all of our park assets, our open space assets, our recreation programming, and it looked at what should our standards be, right? So after a lot of community outreach and input, we decided, we determined what those standards would be. And so one such standard, for example, and this is where I'm getting with this Robbie Burger Park, that standard is that every home in Fairfield should be within a half mile, which is generally an acceptable walking distance to a park or open space. Well, along North Texas, once again, sort of revitalization of North Texas, 2030 North Texas, for anybody that's been around Fairfield quite a while, there used to be, I think it was a bowling alley there before my time. Ever since I've been here, it's just been a vacant lot. Well, it's a vacant lot no more. And so there's a community center there. There's some sport courts. There's some playground apparatus. But from that location, the closest park as the crow flies was about 0.8 of a mile. And so, again, going back to now setting some standards, this is definitely was a park desert, and now this community is going to benefit. The wonderful thing about it is the community center is a partnership with Solano County First Five. So First Five is actually going to have their second First Five center. Their first one was in Vallejo. Their second one now is going to be at this brand new facility. And that's a beautiful partnership, because as we were getting ready to kick off construction of this project, we were thinking, what are we going to do with this community center that was in these plans? How are we going to staff it? What type of program are we going to put there? How are we going to afford that? And right at that time, just fortuitously, Solano County First Five approached us and said, hey, we're wanting to do a First Five center in Fairfield. We said, we have just the location. So they actually came to the table with some grant funds that help offset and defray some of our local costs in building it. And then on an operations basis, they're going to occupy it. They'll pay for operating the facility. We'll City of Fairfield will handle like big mechanical systems, roofs, HVACs, but the day-to-day operating that center, the county under their First Five program will pay for that. So not only is it adding a park facility in what was a park desert, but now there's going to be, early childhood and family resources center that's going to be right there in that area as well. So, really a beautiful project. And I want to say we're maybe a month away or so from actually having the ribbon cutting on that. So that's coming up.
How much space are they going to take of that? Just out of curiosity.
100%.
100%. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. They'll take all of it. Now, the way our memorandum of understanding works with them is because it's a community space, there will still be opportunity for community to use that space. It's just sort of like pre-planning, right? Somebody can't just show up and walk in and get a room, but with some pre-planning, if we wanted to have a meeting like this, then they would make their conference space available for the community to use it as well.
Cool.
Yeah. And then the last one, City Hall Energy Project. We are yesterday, finance started moving back into the first floor, and that's the last floor. So we've been playing musical floors. Everybody's been moving all around as we've been doing a major energy efficiency upgrade. Our temperatures are starting to stabilize now. So it's not, icebox in one corner and, heater in the other corner. Ultimately, just I'll put the upshot of this project is over the 20-year life cycle of the energy efficiency project, we think we'll save about $17 million in operating costs. That comes with a little bit of, because of the way the financing structure is, a little increase in costs operationally on the front end. And then by about year 6 or 7, it breaks even. And then from there, the cost savings just accelerate. The debt then that we issued on it is a 15-year term. So after year 15, then we'll see massive savings. By year 20, that's where that 17 million comes in. And, by year 25, 30, right, we didn't even project out that far because we know we'll be saving. So it's not just energy efficiency at City Hall and all of our facilities. We've also added solar, Allen Witt, big solar installation over there at our police training facility out at the Cordelia Library. So it was a comprehensive, about a $30 million project. And I just heard this morning that there's some areas where we think that we'll actually be returning some of the borrowed money because some of it's coming in a little bit less than expected. So all that's great. We're also replacing our central utility plant. So technically our Civic Center campus over here, right across the street is, a microgrid. And we have a central utility plant where essentially there's a natural gas generator that generates electricity. And then the heat from that is what heats and cools the building. I wouldn't pretend to know the engineering behind all of that. But that was 50 years old and it was being held together by, duct tape and bubble gum. And so they have been working over there. Lisa, you've probably seen all the trucks and equipment and everything in that parking lot. Every day I'm trying not to hit something as I'm parking in and out of there. So, replacing 50-year-old assets under this program as well. So just a lot of good that's coming from that program, and doing it in a way that is very fiscally prudent and, with a mind towards how do we start to shave our operational costs long-term as an organization. The number one issue that I think everybody recognizes in the community is the impacts of homelessness on the community. And so somewhat a controversial project in some parts of town. I understand that. But the Vista Ridge project is under construction. They're about 2 months under construction now. That was a Sure Stay Hotel up off North Texas Street, way up by Texas Roadhouse. And that's going to be converting those 100 hotel rooms into 50 technically 51 apartment units, but that 51st unit is going to be the manager's unit. It'll be 50 units of permanent supportive housing. It'll have wraparound services for the residents that will live there. One of the sort of misnomers that I think is out in the community is it's this notion that this is going to be this constant churn like it's a homeless shelter. This is not a homeless shelter. This is a permanent affordable housing project that has wraparound support services for the residents that will live there. As I have talked with city managers and colleagues that I have around the state that have done similar projects, I've heard on probably a handful of occasions from them, they were surprised at how people, as they moved in and once they got stabilized, basically recognized this is where I'm going to live for the rest of my life. And that's because, for one, our homeless population, the fastest growing demographic segment of our homeless population is seniors. It's unfortunate, but it is an exploding population that are, getting pushed onto the streets. So this will help with that. It'll also have veteran preference. What that means is preference number one, you're from Fairfield. Preference number two, you're a veteran. If you meet those two categories, you're first into these units. So we have 10 units that are designated under our housing choice voucher program. It's the Section 8 program out of our housing authority. We've taken 50 of those rental vouchers that normally they go with a person and you can move wherever you want and the voucher follows you. Instead, we've taken 50 of those vouchers and we've made them what is called project-based. So they are now attached permanently to this project. And so now if somebody moves out of this project, no problem. I'm happy for them. Next person moving in has to qualify under the Section 8 requirements. And again, now all of those preferences. And so we have a contract with HUD that locks those vouchers in as project-based. So they stay there. They pay essentially market rent for those units. And if you're doing the math, if you get $23 million from the state of California to acquire and rehabilitate the property, you have no debt costs, right? So to operate the project with all of the wraparound permanent supportive services is very costly. If you're getting market rent out of those 50 units now, you have essentially a highly profitable project. And then that's what is paying for all of those wraparound supportive services. So it's a layering of funding so that it isn't an impact on our bottom line as an organization or on the housing authority as an organization, and the supportive services that the population needs. So that's under construction. It should be completed around February of next year. But so far, it looks like the construction on that project's coming along nicely. Speaking of our housing department, we also are an entitlement jurisdiction from HUD for what is the Community Development Block Grant Program. So we get about $850,000 a year that comes from HUD into the block grant program. CDBG is essentially, it's a list a mile long of sort of restrictions, but otherwise you can use it on almost anything you want, so long as it positively impacts low-income residents or areas that are concentrations of low income and poverty. And so we're in the process right now of updating what is called the consolidated plan. So every 5 years, you have to do a consolidated plan. The consolidated plan then is what sets the guidelines on an annualized basis of how we then will deploy those monies. And so it's very community centric. What does the community identify as the needs? And so I encourage everybody to go in and take the survey. It takes maybe 10 minutes to answer some questions. It's right there, fairfield.ca.gov/CDBG. Take the survey, identify what you think the community's needs are. We then will be pulling all of that into prioritizing what the community identifies, and that will set the next 5-year plan for how those monies will be spent on an annualized basis. Anheuser-Busch. So previously I was saying, hey, I'm optimistic this thing is going to sell right away. It looks like it sold right away. Problem is I just don't know to whom. So I have an idea, but as of right now, there is no formal announcement on a sale of the Anheuser-Busch site. But I have been contacted by an organization that said, well, we don't have a contract in hand, but we're pretty sure we were the ones that are going to be purchasing it. Their interest is in maintaining it as a manufacturing site. As they did a little bit of exploration with me, they said, well, what are the types of things the city would want there or accept there? And I said, well, if your plan is, knocking it down and putting up warehouses, you're going to catch a tough time because there's a lot of community pride wrapped up in that Anheuser-Busch site. Since it's been here for 50 years, it was a landmark as you're coming up the freeway. So it's going to have to be something that the community can be proud of. Hopefully, it's going to be some sort of corporate manufacturer where it's also going to have jobs, right? And so they got that loud and clear. That's their intent on the site. So no real update for you other than sounds like somebody has been selected and is going to be approved to purchase it, but there is no purchase and sale agreement in hand yet. So not authorized to say who and all that stuff. So good news is that does seem to be moving along. I was very glad. I'll just share a little funny story though. One of the things that they told me when I was talking to them, they said, yeah, have you guys gotten quick response from Anheuser-Busch? I said, boy, they really seem bureaucratic. And I said, thank you. That's exactly what we have been dealing with, of just never quite knowing, right? The left hand just doesn't quite know what the right hand's doing. And I chalk that up to probably Anheuser-Busch hasn't sold a lot of property in the last, few decades. And all of a sudden they're selling properties. And so they're probably, relearning that muscle memory. Last thing I'll touch on, again, this is kind of the rehash from State of the City, but very important. Our real-time information center, our RTIC, as well as our drone as first responder, game changer in policing and even on the fire side. There was a fire at North Bay Healthcare's hospital center. So, of course, fire department rolls, right? Roll a couple of engines over there. Nobody knows where it's at, but the alarm's going off. Well, in a big facility like that, how do you find the fire? Well, you start running around looking for smoke and looking for where that fire might be. We got the drone in the air. They turned on the infrared. They said, oh, it's right there, and narrowed in within just a couple of minutes. Our fire response team was right to where it was. I forget exactly. I think it was some electrical system thing. They got it out, basically saved themselves a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of damage to North Bay. North Bay loves our drone as first responder program right now. I'll tell you that.
That's awesome.
So it's made a big impact. On the policing side, it's almost every single week we have a new story of ways in which the drones are helping our police department really just get right on top of crime and incidences and support. It's to the point now when officers are rolling, they're actually calling back to dispatch saying, "Hey, can I get a drone in the air?" Right? Because it just gives you eyes, and it's like back when the helicopters would come overhead, but you had to wait for them and they were expensive. Nope, almost every officer on almost every incident now can have a drone over them and have eyes in the sky. So it has just absolutely been a game changer. We're right now, I think we have 5 locations now throughout the city, so we pretty much have almost 100% coverage with the drones all across the city. So really fantastic program. All right, now I'll get to the meat. Measure P. Raise your hand if you know what Measure P is. We got one. All right. Terrence is on. I see Terrence on there. Thank you, Terrence. All right. Measure P is a local sales tax measure here in Fairfield. Very technically, it is a transaction and use tax, a TUT. I'm not going to refer to it as that because it gets a little wonky and technical. I'm just going to refer to it as sales tax. So what is Measure P? Back in 2012, I think most all of us were around in the Great Recession. Yeah, okay. I'm just checking. Well, Fairfield, it's not hyperbole to say that by about 2010, 11, 12, it was a serious discussion in Fairfield of whether or not bankruptcy was something that the city might be facing. We were particularly hit hard by the Great Recession. Great Recession is the first time in California history where essentially property values reduced. So as the housing bubble burst, right, tanks housing values, and then that drug down the rest of the economy. as people started getting laid off and the economy's dragging, people stopped spending. Our predominant revenue stream is property taxes and sales taxes. So if both of your two big revenue streams reduce at the same time, it's detrimental. And that's what we were facing. To add insult to injury, then state of California was also dealing with their own financial crisis. So what they do, they did what they do best. They came knocking on local government's door and said, hey, we've got to close our budget deficits. You have redevelopment dollars. We're going to take those. And so they eliminated redevelopment agencies. That was, while not intended to be an operational funding source, at least it was something that you had where it was like, okay, it's not all doom and gloom. So by 2012, revenues are decimated. We lose redevelopment. And that was almost the death knell for city of Fairfield. And so at that time, city said, well, it's either bankruptcy or we cut services so steep that we're not even almost recognizable as a city, or we talk about a revenue stream. And so that's where Measure P came from. So in November 2012, a ballot measure was put to the voters to add a 1 cent sales tax, a local transaction and use tax, to all purchases in Fairfield. And thankfully, voters approved it. Not only did they approve it, they approved it at a 67% yes. So for those mathematically inclined folks, that is over 2/3 support for it. And it was intended predominantly for maintaining fire response and emergency medical response, neighborhood patrols, police patrols. We had laid off a lot of officers. We had browned out fire stations. And the results of that stuff just aren't good. And it also brought back street maintenance that we had to cut. Now, there's a sort of a critical factor here that I'll come back, but at the time that once Measure P was adopted and that revenue started coming to the city, it represented more than 20% of our general fund revenue. So that 1 cent was more than 1/5 of our revenue. Hang on to that. And the city wouldn't be the same, right? Take it from former Councilwoman Moy. Fairfield simply would not be the same if it were not for Measure P. So at that time, when we went out and we talked to residents, I wasn't here at that time, but when the city did, there was 3 predominant things that people said would be needed in order for them to support it. Number one, local control. There we were in the Great Recession going through a time where the loss of redevelopment was because Sacramento swooped in and took money. Sacramento had done that in other prior recessions. So after the .com, we got the triple flip, right? I mean, there's all these mechanisms that the state has done every time they've had financial difficulties of dipping into local government's pocket in order to balance their books. So residents said, hey, anything we do, the state can't take. Well, local sales tax, transaction and use taxes, state cannot touch them. They are now constitutionally protected, only local dollars. So every dollar that's generated by Measure P stays in Fairfield. Nobody else from Sacramento or Washington can take that. Second thing was oversight. Residents were loud and clear about there has to be independent oversight. If you're saying you're going to spend these monies on things like police patrols and fire services and street maintenance, we want someone else coming in and checking that that's how you're using those funds. And so in 2012, after Measure P was adopted, we also created the Measure P Citizen Oversight Committee, and they have been in operation ever since. So they are citizens that apply to be on the board or on the committee. Then they get onto the committee. They usually meet 4 times a year, although they can meet as much as they want. And they start out the first meeting of every year. They come in and they basically say, okay, city, here's the things we want to look at this year. And then that's where we line out the rest of that year to show them the types of things. So for example, I remember a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago, they wanted to see a portion of our funds help to support the PAL program, the Police Activities League, after school programming. And so they held their quarterly meeting at the PAL building so that they could learn more about the programming that was being funded by Measure P. So citizen oversight is there, that box is checked. And then accountability, not just citizens saying it, but then auditors. So every year in our fiscal audit, which we're required to do, we have a separate section that's specific to Measure P. They then ensure that we are accounting for those funds appropriately in accordance with Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, with GASB, Government Accountability Standards Board, as well as with the ways in which we said that we were going to utilize those funds. And so all of those three pillars that the community said were very important were implemented into Measure P as soon as it was adopted. All of this stuff is open. So if you go to fairfield.ca.gov, Measure P, right there, it can link you straight to the Oversight Committee's webpage. This is just a graphic of an annual brochure that they produce. Every year, they also produce an annual report, and they come to City Council in a public session, and they give a presentation to City Council, say, here's the things we looked at, here's the things we found, and here's our annual report for the whole public to see. So that's up on the website. I brought some of the pamphlets and some of that information, but they do, the Oversight Committee does a great job, and appreciate them a lot. The types of things that the community, I've already sort of intimated at them, but the types of things the community said were important to fund with those monies were rapid 911 response, neighborhood patrols, fully staffing our fire stations, and then youth and senior services. And I am, I got ahead of myself. So there was one flaw with Measure P at the time it was adopted in 2012. It was only a 5-year tax measure. So it was set to sunset in 2017. So in 2016, the city went back to the voters and basically said, hey, would you give us a longer term extension? And they asked for a 15 or 16-year extension. So through 2032, Measure P was extended. Voters thankfully said, yes, we see the impacts it's had. And not only did I think it's a clear indication that the city did a good job of not only communicating how they were spending the funds, but by 2016, when it went back to voters to extend that sunset, 69% of voters approved the extension on Measure P. So 67% approved it. By 4 years later, 69% of residents saw the value in it and said, yeah, extend this longer term. And I'm proud to say these are numbers, 2025 numbers taken directly from the Citizen Oversight Committee's annual report. $12.5 million of Measure P was spent for the police department, $6 million on the fire department, $4.1 million for our street crew to fix roadways, and then $1.7 million in parks and recreation for things like the senior center and some of our subsidized youth programming. So fast forward to today. Remember how I mentioned when Measure P was adopted, it was over 20% of the general fund. Today, it represents about 16%. It's going down as a percentage of the total general fund. There's a variety of reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is we're actually seeing sales tax revenue, just general sales tax revenue, slightly increasing 1.5% over the last couple of years. Measure P is going down, decreasing by 1% or 2% year over year. Who here is guilty of shopping online? A lot of those online sales, depending on how they're booked, and we could have a whole another 1 hour session just talking about that, do not come to Fairfield because they are not captured as a transaction and use tax. So Measure P does not apply to them, right? And so as people have shifted from brick and mortar retail sales to online retail purchases, we're seeing that revenue stream come down a little bit. And that's one factor that leads to the unfortunate situation that we have not been shy of talking about, and that is our structural deficit. So just 2 weeks ago, City Council adopted our fiscal year 26-27 mid-cycle update budget. We do 2-year budgeting, so this was just the mid-cycle halfway point. In it, we have a $12 million structural deficit. Starting about 3 years ago, we started saying we do 10-year financial projections. We have a fantastic finance team. In fact, just learned Yesterday, we were again awarded from GFOA with the Triple Crown Award, which is excellence in budgeting, excellence in accounting, and then what's called the popular financial reporting. So sort of putting it into more plain language for people to understand the nuances of fund accounting. And so we were awarded all three of those by GFOA for excellence. So Triple Crown. But about 3 years ago, we started saying, hey, we've got a problem coming down the pipeline, and our expenses are simply rising faster than our revenues. Put that into context. Our revenues in this budget, they increased by about 1.5%. Our expenses are projected to increase by about 3.2%. That's a growing deficit. That is what makes it structural. We are not in the Great Recession where the bottom's dropped out of stuff and our revenues have dropped, but they will eventually come back. We simply are in a time of inflation where that inflation is hitting us faster than our revenues are inflating. So a few years ago, we said, City Council, we got to do something, right? How do we solve for this? At that time, City Council, we presented them. We said, okay, there's austerity, right? Austerity means cuts. We can cut our way to a balanced budget. Now, at the time, our projection was about a $20 million per year structural deficit starting last year. And council said, well, that's a lot to cut all at once. What does that look like? Well, we said, that's 15% of your general fund, really. I mean, it's a pretty massive cut. And they said, well, no, we don't want to do that, right? And I recommended against that as well, because, I think the Great Recession also taught us around the world as national governments around the world tried to deal with the fallout of the Great Recession. A lot of them did austerity. I'm pretty sure Greece is still struggling to climb out of just massive governmental cuts to balance their budget, right? It doesn't work in the way we all think it might work. The other end of that spectrum, we said, okay, well, we could just go for a large tax increase right now and cover the deficit. Council said, no, we can't just first indication of a problem, go right to the taxpayers and say, hey, bail us out, right? Good choice. So what they said is go down the middle, right? And so that's what we've done for the past couple of years. I was here a couple of years ago talking about measures L&M, right? Transient occupancy tax, so hotel taxes, put that on the ballot. Voters approved that. Everybody gets it. Hey, guests coming and staying in Fairfield ought to pay their fair share for the services that they also enjoy, right? They too call the police department and the fire department and drive on the roads and so on and so forth. So that was one revenue. We did our business license modernization and modernized that tax that was as old as me. That also sort of reshuffled all of the complex tiers and sort of made it a little bit more of an equitable program. So that increased revenue as well, more so on the larger business side. But that brought in a little additional revenue. We've updated all of our user fees. So a user fee is a service from a city that you don't pay for, but for the time you need that service. Best, easiest example is a building permit. I don't need a building inspector unless I'm remodeling my kitchen to come out and tell me I did the electrical right. So I pay a permit fee. That permit fee covers the cost of plan check and inspection. So we have right-sized all of our user fees up and down across the organization to be 100% cost recovery. There's still pockets where you subsidize. So sticking with the building permit, water heaters. We subsidize water heaters because especially natural gas, right? If those aren't done right, boom. And if you paid for that full cost, contractors and homeowners, they just wouldn't get the permit. So you give a lower permit fee. So, but across the board, we have right-sized all of our user fees to bring them in line with covering the full cost of the services that are delivered under those uses. And we have made cuts. So, council chose the balanced approach. We have tightened our belt as well. And in tightening our belt, we have now frozen 24 and a half full-time equivalent positions. That includes 4 sworn police officers where we had vacancies and we're just not filling those vacancies. But across the organization, essentially 24 and a half positions, we have not filled now for 2 years. We have basically cut across the board 5% from every single department's budget. So I went to all the department heads and I said, you've got to give me 5% out of your discretionary spending. And they have done that down to the bone. And we're to the point where in this last budget, we had slight increases because a couple departments said, hey, I can't actually pay for the PG&E cost increases in this next year because I've essentially cut everything out of my discretionary. So we had areas where, hey, yeah, we've got to pay to keep the lights on, right? So we have cut as much as we can. We had cut the deficit down to about $9 million. And then some other cost increases have continued to creep in. So things like software systems. So Microsoft, we had to renew our Microsoft enterprise contract, $600,000 a year increase. You can't really just walk away from Microsoft once you're embedded into Microsoft. In the Great Recession, the city of LA tried to do that. They left Microsoft and went to Google. Within 1 year, they went back to Microsoft because there's just no other enterprise systems that are as robust as Microsoft. Our body-worn cameras for our police officers, that contract came due last year as well, $600,000 or $680,000 per year increase. We're mandated by law to have body-worn cameras. You can't get away from it, right? General liability insurance. I know small business owners feel this, homeowners feel this. We've had over 160% increase in our general liability costs in the last 4 years as a city. One of the things that we've added into our policy platform as we advocate in Sacramento is for tort reform. Increasingly, juries are giving massive rewards on liabilities because it lets the government, they got the money. So a trip and fall case out of a neighboring city that's in our insurance pool, $18.5 million award by the jury for somebody that tripped on the sidewalk, fell, hit their head, had a brain injury. I feel terrible for that individual. I just can't fathom how you can valuate that. I think I heard you say you're in insurance. How you can valuate a claim like that at $18.5 million, right? That's a payday for the attorneys. Let me be clear on that. It's not the individual. 40 to 50% of that payout's going to the attorneys, right? So tort reform is a big conversation going on in Sacramento right now because it's just unsustainable, and we're easy targets. I believe at last check, we have 38 active cases of litigation right now in the city. Yeah. So,
Hey, David,
yes, sir.
speaking on the lawsuits and the laws and whatnot, and general liability is just one part of that. The employment laws and regulations and some of the awards that are coming out of these juries for, people that are getting fired and suing, whatever it may be, something to do. I mean, employers, and I would
Yep.
think the city is dealing with this too, as well as the cost of litigation just for employees.
Monty, are you paying attention to our closed session agenda? Yes. Yes, we are. Unfortunately, yes, we are.
I mean, it's mind-boggling. I'm looking at this going, okay, so you're going to get how many millions because you got fired? Yeah,
Or
and again,
didn't even get,
it's the attorneys that are winning the money.
yeah, or didn't even get fired. Just
Yeah,
has some grievance against an organization, right?
exactly.
That's
Exactly.
and yeah, that costs. More often than not, we can defend those and sort of bat them down. But yeah, that may cost you $100,000. And I know city council is always flabbergasted when we're going to them saying, hey, yeah, we think doing $120,000 settlement on this case is a good deal. And they're like, this is absurd. Like, yeah, we'll spend $500,000 defending it and then we may lose. Right. And so, yeah, it's a tough situation.
Yeah.
Speaking along those lines on employment, as part of tightening our belt, right, we renegotiated our contracts with all of our bargaining units a couple of years ago. I'm not the most popular man in City Hall, but we did not there was no pay raises for any of our city employees. So for the 2-year period, we did a cash bonus one time, sort of a cash in lieu of giving cost of living adjustments. So their base salaries have not gone up in a couple of years. And with those cash payments, that also helps to temper our unfunded pension liabilities because cash payments like that aren't pensionable. And so, right, again, long-term strategies are things that we're really working on, so that I'm not just taking a 1 or 2 year view of trying to get the city's finances in order. I'm trying to take a 10-year view of, come early 2030s, how is Fairfield in the most beneficial financial position we can be in? So we about have that structural deficit, but here we are today, right? We still have a structural deficit. Thankfully, we've had healthy reserves, but if we don't do anything within the next 2 years, we will blow through those reserves. We'll be down to our reserve minimum, which is 20% of our expenditures. Within 4 years, we will have depleted the general fund. So that's not a position we want to be in. So when we went back to council last year, they said, well, let's maybe start talking seriously about a tax. They said, what would cuts look like? So I brought them a list of how we could cut our way to a balanced budget, and it's grim. We would have to close some parks. We would reduce further some of our body count in terms of either vacancy reductions, potentially layoffs. We would then start to strategically brown out fire stations. So in peak fire season, we might have them all staffed, but in the wintertime, might be, yeah, that station over there is going to sit dark for this week. And then next week, it's that station over there, right? Browning out stations so that you reduce those costs. And we would probably have to have some cuts to our roadway maintenance because Public Works is just too big a department that is funded through the general fund to not have some part of those cuts. And so if we got there, it probably would not be the, hey, you know, one percentage for all, 5% across the board. It'd be more targeted. But we're at the point where we're talking real cuts that the community would notice. Thus far, we have made cuts internally that for the most part, the community hasn't really felt. We would be to a point of having to make cuts that the community feels. So council said, well, let's maybe look at sales tax. And that's where we're at. And so Measure P update. Next Tuesday night, City Council is going to vote to place a sales tax measure on the November ballot. And what that will do is that will add, if approved by voters, that would add 1 cent to the existing 1 cent. So Measure P overall then would be a 2 cent local sales tax, but it would be an addition of 1 cent. Now, for those that have maybe we're doing some mental math, Measure P right now generates about $24 million per year. You double that, so that's another $24 million per year. We have a $12 million deficit. So one of the things that we have polled to, for one, check, is there even appetite in the community to potentially support this? And if so, what are the priorities? No surprise still, right? Police, fire, roadways, homelessness, though, is the one that's cropped in. 10 years ago, homelessness wasn't even on the radar. Today, it's one of the top issues, right? And so those are the types of things that the community would want to see. One of the things that we also did in January of this year at our city council goal setting retreat was we started teeing them up with pavement maintenance projects. So we do every, I think, 2 or maybe 3 years, we do a pavement condition index survey, PCI. That's fancy engineering speak for assessing the quality of our roadways. In Fairfield, across all 700 plus lane miles of roadways that we have, that we manage and maintain, our overall average score is a 64 PCI. State of California, across every jurisdiction, average is a 65. So we're pretty much average across the state. That's not saying much, but we're pretty much average across the state. For us to maintain a score of 64, we would need about another $6 to $8 million per year of roadway maintenance funding. So if there's a gap between closing our deficit and additional revenue, I know where I'm recommending to City Council that money go. And that's plowing a lot more money into our pavement maintenance program and more money into our homeless services while maintaining the police and fire services that we have. So ultimately, as I've been doing these presentations up until just 2 weeks ago, it was really a question of if council places this on the ballot. 2 weeks ago, we showed them the draft language and they said, yeah, bring it back to us on July 7th. And we want to take a vote to put it on the ballot. So at this point in time, if I were a betting man, my bet is that the city council is going to place this on the November ballot. But at the end of the day, the message here is still the same. This is a choice for the voters. I assure you, I can cut $12 million out of our expenses. As city manager, I would deliver to the city council a plan on how we could manage with the level of revenue that we have and match our expenses to that. I also know that that will be an impact in the community. So ultimately, we can cut our way to it, or Measure P update is an option, and that's going to be up to the voters. And that's the appropriate place for it to be. And I'm happy to take any and all questions. I know I went a little long, sorry. But yeah, we'll do it.
All right.
I think we're right on time, and thank you. That was very comprehensive. I think it's,
Having a hard time hearing you, Lisa.
I said that was really comprehensive and gives an understanding of historically. Present.
I guess the question that I have, David, is the original Measure P, that 1 cent that got extended before it sunsetted. It sunsets what did you say 36?
32.
32? Does this
Yes.
eliminate that from happening now?
It does.
So
Yes.
it'll continue on at 1 + 1.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be 1 + 1 until, as opposed to having some date certain sunset, be 1 + 1 until eliminated by voters.
Okay.
Dr. Moss.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question. I just said thank you in the chat.
All right. Thank you.
Simi.
Any other questions?
Are there still going to be cuts that you'll look to make in addition to the Measure P funding? Or is that just going to go by the wayside? I mean, you've frozen some jobs. Are there going to be any additional, cuts that you would look still to possibly make?
I wouldn't say cuts, but we are going to, so long as I'm here, so long as I'm city manager, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we're focused on long-term and bringing fiscal prudence to the way in which we allocate resources. So cuts, I can't say for sure, but like somebody had mentioned, that we were listed as one of the, top AI. Maybe I think maybe you mentioned AI.
No, that was
someone online.
that was
Anyways,
mine.
that was fun. Yeah. So I was interviewed for a magazine article a few months ago, and they had this question: oh, well, do you think AI is going to allow you to cut a bunch of positions? I said, absolutely not. Fairfield today, our FTE count is 587. That is fewer employees than we had in 2008. For a city that has grown population-wise by more than 30% over those last 18 years.
Yep.
So I don't think cuts any further are really feasible.
Okay.
But what we will do is we will make very targeted investments in ways in which I don't have to increase that employee count. So for example, I'll give you a great example. In this budget discussion that we had with the council over the last couple of council meetings, I'm recommending to council that we actually hire 9 more firefighters. And for most anybody, you would say, well, why the hell would you hire more employees if you're cutting positions and we have a deficit? Well, because fire department operates 24/7, 365. There is no downtime in a fire department. So if somebody gets injured and they're off work for a legitimate workers' comp case for 2 months, that is 2 months of overtime then that we're paying. So not only do you start burning your firefighters out, but we spend $4.5 to $5 million a year in overtime. So just the vacation that they are allowed, which everybody's got to have vacation, just the amount of vacation firefighters are allowed in the organization, 9 firefighters would eliminate any vacation overtime. And so when you do the math, having those 9 firefighters will actually save us money on overtime.
Right.
So yes, and it's much healthier for the firefighters to not just be in the grind and like, hey, I had to miss the kids' party because I had mandatory overtime to go and backfill for somebody that, called out sick. So those are the types of things that I don't think our employee count will ever go down from where we're at right now. But we're never like, it is a pipe dream that we'll ever be back to where we were in 2009, because those systems and making investments in that type of stuff is what we're going to have to do to ensure that I'm taking rote work and automating that so that the employees are more focused on how do I help deliver service in the community, right? That higher functioning. If we can make headway in Sacramento on tort reform, that will be reducing costs on a liability, right? So there's always going to be areas where, our new IT director, he's been here just shy of a year now. He's been going through and scrubbing. Hey, we've got this, $8,000 per year software subscription that, this one department's using. Hey, we think actually we could make this one tool within the Microsoft Enterprise Suite work for that. Great. Let's integrate that and let's get rid of that subscription. Mm-hmm. So in those types of ways, yeah, we're always looking to cut, but it's not, hey, we're just cutting this program in order to save money at this point in time.
That's what I meant. Streamline, just get, because we're all having to do that, right? I mean, Chambers having Absolutely. To do it, traffic is having to do it. I mean, we all have to look at where we're spending money and where we're getting revenue from,
Correct.
And make sure that those are balanced a bit better.
Yeah. What's the real ROI
right
on an investment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, David, one of the things that, obviously, your counterparts in Vacaville are going through the same process. And I've sit in on some of those meetings too, as well. And Savita, one of the things that she did, and maybe you're doing this and it's not part of this presentation, is she showed what percentage of non-citizens pay this sales tax. And of course, in Vacaville, with the outlets and the villages, they have a lot of shoppers that come from out of town. So that was a big number as far as percentages of the people who are paying that tax. And then the other thing was is she basically showed what it was annually for each individual on the average, but then broke it all the way down to what it is daily. And as a person who has sold high ticket items myself for many, many years, I've used that tool to sell somebody as, hey, how bad do you want this? It's only a cup of coffee a day. Those kind of things the common Joe can understand, and be more open to saying, yes, I'm going to vote for this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. We've done the exercise of breaking it down. Off the top of my head, I apologize. I don't remember what that number is. I just haven't been using that in my slide deck.
Right.
On what percentage comes from out of town, we didn't do that. And what I mean by that is our consultancy, HDL, that does all of our sales tax auditing. So for everybody's education, right? So a business collects sales tax. They then remit that sales tax to the state of California. State of California then quarterly sends that money to us. Well, we then pay a third party to audit the state to confirm, we're getting the amount of sales tax we're supposed to be getting, right? So that company that we use is HDL. HDL can do that for us, but it was about $12,000 for them to run that analysis. We suspect that we're somewhere probably 20 to 25% of sales tax revenue comes from outside of Fairfield, mostly just because of the 80 corridor. I would love to say the mall is still a big regional draw, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. We do have some retailers that are regional draws, but we're not as big in that arena as Vacaville is. So I can see why it would make sense for them to run that number. Right. But for me, I just felt like that was, 10, 12 grand. It wasn't necessarily worth this.
Yeah, understand.
I know you said, and it doesn't surprise me, that the unhoused has obviously become a hot issue and always has been, but definitely more so now than ever. Is there any specifics as to what programs or what would be dedicated to that? I mean, not necessarily the dollars, but what the focus would be obviously being a business and being where, we represent businesses, we hear the plight of dealing with the unhoused and how expensive it is in our businesses. And I deal with it on a daily basis too, as a chamber. So I'm just curious.
So right now, out of the general fund, I should know this off the top of my head. I want to say we are about $650,000 a year just for sheltering that we pay for. That's down from where we used to be. So there's been a shift. I'll little explanation, and I'll come get to your question. I'll come to your answer. I promise you. There's been a shift. So 2020, COVID hit, federal money and state money plowed into homelessness, right? Because it was an exploding problem. Most all of that money was for sheltering. So we massively expanded our sheltering capacity in Fairfield. That is all that state federal money has dried up. So we now are paying out of the general fund in order to pay for those types of social services that, quite frankly, aren't really city's responsibility. Social services is the county's responsibility constitutionally. But we know that's just not, that doesn't work, right? So most of the money now is flowing into permanent housing solutions. So as I understand the folks that are upset about the Vista Ridge, and I understand why they're upset about the Vista Ridge project, and this is just my opinion, right? This isn't an opinion of the city council or a policy position. We will never solve homelessness unless you have someplace to actually house people. Our homelessness epidemic is a housing epidemic. And I don't think anybody here can't admit that, yeah, we got a housing problem, not just in Fairfield, not just in Solano County, not just in California, but nationally. We have a housing problem, housing affordability problem. That's what's driving your homeless issue.
Right.
There's a statistic, and it's kind of hard to follow, so bear with me. For every 90 people that are taken off of the streets, 91 go onto the streets. We're on a treadmill that's getting faster, and we're not getting anywhere.
Right.
So the state has really emphasized shifting money towards, we need permanent housing solutions. So now, what does that look like? Well, this funding, for one, the general fund monies that have been allocated for funding the sheltering operations that we have and our outreach team and some of those things, after this next year, that dries up. So that's one of those areas where, okay, am I laying employees off in order to keep funding that? That's probably the community's priority. So I respect that. And I'm fine recommending that. I don't want to lose employees, but I also understand what the number one issue is, right? So that's a real answer. So if Measure P passes, though, with additional money, that allows us then extra opportunity to match against state and federal grant opportunities to build more permanent housing solutions. And that comes in the form of, not everything has to be supportive housing that's homelessness specific, but senior affordable housing, right? Seniors on a fixed income, they need someplace affordable to live.
Right.
In this day and age, that is subsidized housing. And the programs, in order to package and fund those types of affordable housing development projects, you have to have local matching money in order to be competitive, because it's a competitive marketplace. There's lots of other jurisdictions all competing with grant applications for those same limited state dollars or federal dollars. And to be more competitive based on the formulas, it comes down to local match. How much local match? Can you put property into the project, right? And so those are the types of things that, from my perspective, are long-term solutions, and I think are ways in which Measure P would help us in order to, like, oh, hey, we need an extra 500,000 to really be competitive on this, HCD, State Housing Community Development program for this project that we have planned. Well, now we have a little bit of cushion out of the general fund to slide some money in, get that state grant. Now we're delivering additional affordable housing units. And so our housing department's done a remarkable job since 2020. I think that's when that first one broke ground since 2021. So in the last 5 years, we've delivered more than 500 units of affordable housing in Fairfield. And we have another project right now that we should find out here in this next month if we got the whole project financed. But that would be another 67 units of affordable housing over on East Tabor, right next door to the Robbie Burberger Park. Somewhat by design to where now we want to put residents there and say, hey, keep eyes on the park, keep it safe, right? Take pride in it. And then it's a family project. So those families then are going to have the First Five Center right there and a park for those kids to play in.
I thought it was interesting that you said that the potential new buyers of Budweiser came to you and asked you what they should put there. Do you think that that is because they want something from the city? They want money from the city?
Well, every good developer wants money from the city, but no, I didn't get that sense at all. I think it was much more of a, hey, here's a few different lines that they view as opportunities on that site. And is there any that are red lines? Right. And that was more the way I took it.
Okay.
So they are, so yeah, I don't want to say too much just to kind of keep the confidentiality on that. But no, I didn't get any sense that they were asking for money. I think it was more like, hey, if we're going to look at options on this site, what do you not want to see us do?
Okay. And they didn't have anything in mind. I mean,
oh no, they had
things in mind, but
they absolutely have something in mind. In fact, it was another one of the bidders. So I think there's a tertiary deal that's also getting worked out right now. That would be, from my perspective, very good for the community.
Awesome.